We're going to call to order this Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority meeting on March 17th, 2020. Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Howard.
Present.
Commissioner Greeno.
Here.
Chair Inscore.
Here.
Commissioner Tompkins. Here. And Commissioner Cowan is not here.
And let the record show that Commissioner Cowan will likely join us, and you can mark at the time that she does, if you would please. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will open up general public comment. Any member of the public can address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter that is either on or off our agenda. Do we have any general public comment this afternoon? Seeing no public comment, we'll close public comment and we will move on into our agenda. The first item on our agenda is a ceremonial item, and it is something that I think is a very well-timed resolution in a recognition of Eileen Cooper for her decades of civic engagement. Mr. Word, did you want to say anything about this before I read the resolution?
Mr. Chair Inscore recommended that this be placed on the agenda as an acknowledgement of Eileen Cooper, who you're all familiar with, as she's fairly emblematic of a citizen activist who's regularly here voicing her opinions and being engaged, and regardless of how her opinions landed with respect to the decisions that got made, I think everyone needs to acknowledge this absolutely is an engaged citizen, and to the extent that we want to celebrate engaged citizens, she is a fine example.
Yeah, absolutely.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2020-02. I will read this into the record. Any public comment regarding the resolution? All right, let me read it into the record, and then we will hold the vote, please. Whereas Eileen Cooper has been a familiar face at public meetings over the past several decades, and whereas Eileen Cooper has freely expressed her opinions, often made suggestions, and offered her ideas as a potential creative solutions to address the issues that were being decided by elected officials, and whereas Eileen Cooper has most recently served as a volunteer on the Del Norte Solid Waste Task Force, and whereas Eileen Cooper has passionately expressed her perspectives on many aspects of reuse, recycling, composting, integrated and hazardous waste management, and whereas the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority wishes to express appreciation and to honor Eileen Cooper for being a model of civic engagement, taking time to consider issues of community concern and regularly offering her opinions about those issues at public meetings. Now therefore be it resolved that the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority Board hereby acknowledges Eileen Cooper's decades of civic engagement as an active participant in the process of local governance, passed and adopted by the Board of Commissioners of the Solid Waste Management Authority Board, County of Del Norte, State of California, this 17th day of March 2020, by the following polled vote. Would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Howard.
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno.
Yes.
Chair Inscore.
Yes.
Commissioner Cowan.
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins.
Yes.
Thank you. We will move on. On consent, we have the minutes, the receipt of the letter from Hambro WSG regarding CPI adjustment and a budget transfer in the amount of $4,200.
Mr. Chair, if I might add some information regarding item 2.2.
All right. Go ahead.
Before you take the vote, the letter attached to the agenda requests not only the annual CPI adjustment, but Hambro does also request allowing a 100% CPI percentage to as part of that. Their contract calls for an 80% CPI, and unfortunately both David Schlegel and Joel Wallen are self-isolating at this time, and so they weren't able to attend the meeting. But I did inform them that without further information, I would not be inclined to recommend that you approve the 100% CPI without further information. So that's my recommendation, that we accept and acknowledge that we received this letter, but that we are pursuing our current contract agreements and not 100% CPI without further justification.
Okay. All right, so we're still just receiving the letter at this point in time.
That would be correct, sir.
All right. Any public comment on anything that's on consent? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board.
Move to approve consent.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I'll second. I have a motion and a second. Would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Greeno,
Yes.
Chair Inscore.
Yes.
Commissioner Cowan.
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins.
Yes.
Commissioner Howard.
Very good. We'll move into the director's reports, which are agenda items 3.1 through 3.5. We'll begin with the director's report. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Chair Inscore. I would like to note that we are trying to enact coronavirus protections at this time, so we're all sitting a little further apart from each other, and we are trying to limit the attendance to the meeting of 10. But also, if there are people at home who have questions or comments that they would like to submit, we can do that via email at this time. And so you would want to submit those to tedd@recycledelnorte.ca.gov. That's tedd@recycledelnorte.ca.gov. The director's report for this month, once again, we operate the Del Norte County Transfer Station, the Klamath Transfer Station, the Gasky Transfer Station at the regular appointed hours without receiving a penny in taxes, and the rates charged at these authority-managed facilities continue to be lower than other similar facilities in Humboldt and Del Norte and Curry counties. You've already approved the resolution honoring Eileen Cooper. Regarding the landfill, on the 28th of February, Kara Seymour and I went out and reviewed with the GHD staff the mitigation and monitoring plan that's associated with the airport land swap that GHD is responsible for. Unfortunately, because of the reduced number of deplanements at the airport, at this point they are only adjusting the plans. There's no funds for actually enacting those plans at this time, but they are readjusting the plans based on the changing conditions that are at the landfill. The semi-annual report for monitoring of the Crescent City landfill, normally due on January 15th, has been delayed significantly because of the delays in collecting the constituent of concern samples and processing those. Agenda item 4.1 is a standard letter requesting a reduction to the post-closure multiplier, which we submit year after year, and has reduced our liability associated with that. Regarding finances, attached to the director's report, you'll see a letter to County Auditor Clinton Shad requesting additional information regarding our GASB 68 compliance, as directed by the board last meeting. Attached also to the director's report is what has been submitted to Cal Recycle. Hopefully that they'll accept making Hambro Recycling eligible to submit a final application for the pilot project. So there's a two-phased application process. You'll notice that the documents attached don't describe what money is going to be used, where it's going to be used, how it's going to be used, what it's going to be used for. That all comes in the second phase of the application. So that's already been submitted per board direction last meeting. On March 6th, we had our regular KFUD program, Rethinking Recycling. This time we were joined by Meredith Knowles of the Food Rescue Project. So discussing food rescue and some of those important programs that we'll be developing in part to comply with SB 1383, which we'll be discussing further in the meeting. There was a broom bash that was scheduled for Saturday, March 28th. Unfortunately, that has been canceled. And during this last month, we did hire Michael McClellan as an internal recruitment as our new office tech. So we're rather delighted about that. Hopefully that will be useful in that if we are short-staffed, we will need to be cross-training and relying on other folks that can step up. So that I think that process is going well, and we look forward to him starting those efforts. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the director's report.
Okay. Any questions from the board to Mr. Ward regarding his report? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to our financials then.
Regarding the financials, let's see. Claims approved by director. Again, you'll see our largest payment, as always, is to Hambro WSG for their good services they provided at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. And in this month, our second biggest payment was to the Del Norte County Auditor for our credit and debit cards. Looking at our cash flow, that was the supplemental reports that were all handed to you on your desk. So that's the one that looks like this, item 3.2. Cash in the bank is 1.162 million plus 198,000 for our last month's rent. Our accounts receivable are generally in good shape. You'll see that the almost all the ones that are overdue have already been turned over to collections. If you have any detailed questions about our financials, Kathy Brewer is here today, so grand opportunity if you're so inclined. Continuing on the financial reports, February was, in terms of cash flow, a relatively good month compared to years prior. Continuing on to item 3.5, the authority revenue report. Our authority service fees were $128,522 ahead of budget for authority service fees, so that's good news, and again underscores the importance of conservative budgeting. And in franchise fees, we're $16,472 ahead of budget, so overall we are $144,994 ahead of budget in terms of revenue.
Very good.
So that completes the director's reports.
Any questions for Mr. Ward regarding financials or his report? Any public comment regarding director's report or the financials as presented? All right, we'll move on then through the agenda itself. Do you
4.1, I think, is the next one.
4.1?
Yeah.
Okay.
Relatively simple. This is a standing direction from the board, and for new members, this is an annual request we submit to Cal Recycle, which is the government agency that looks over our shoulders, and closed landfills, as long as they're closed under standard operations, you take your annual maintenance costs, you multiply that times 30, and that is your liability associated with the landfill. So it takes an application to reduce that multiplier from 30, even though the landfill closed in 2006, and we have to maintain it till 2036. We don't want to have a 30-year liability on our books on an ongoing basis, so we ask Cal Recycle to reduce that multiplier, which then reduces the landfill liability line in our annual audit. So it improves our overall financial picture, but it is rather standing direction unless you want to change it at this point. So more or less.
And that line item is reduced almost by half in the last 6 years, right?
We've gone down a lot, and it improves
wasn't
our
it close
financial.
to $2 million
Yep.
in 2014?
Mm-hmm. If trends continue, in part because we've been able to get this liability reduced, over the next 2 fiscal years, I'm hoping that we'll actually be in the black.
Very good.
But this is an important part of that.
Any questions for Mr. Ward about?
Well, I was going to ask, are there any other factors besides the 30 multiplier that affect it?
That's
that
a
we
really
can
good
change?
question. Thank you so much for asking. Yes, absolutely. And in fact, even though our multiplier has gone down, because we had to go through the 5-year permit revision, that changed the actual costs that were used in that multiplier. So that is the other factor. 30 years times what? So for years we were using one number, then we had to revise our plans. Now we're using a different number with a lower multiplier. So both of those things come into effect. Net result, though, is that the financial assurances that you're required to have cover not only post-closure maintenance costs, but also the corrective action costs that could arise if there were an earthquake, a flood, some other natural disaster. And those are put into 2 categories: water-related releases and non-water related releases. And so there are financial estimates that are required from engineers on both of those. We've completed all of that work, and that goes into the other number.
That sounds like kind of an insurance program, right? We provide the backup money for that in our program, right?
Well, that is correct, but in our case, I just want you all to understand this, these financial numbers are indications of actuarial liability. But the reality of it is if anything went wrong with the landfill, the source of money doesn't change. It's coming from the transfer station. And so whatever monies are necessary at that point in time, whether or not they fit with our projections, we would adjust the rates and the revenues associated with the transfer station in order to address those liabilities.
And that leads me to my final question. What's your assessment of the condition of the landfill, and how liable what do you think we're pretty safe from any catastrophic, or do you think there are some things that may need to be addressed?
Again, thanks for the question. Generally, I think in terms of our post-closure liability of the landfill itself, the landfill mound, that's the 22 acres where all the community trash is buried, I think that's probably in pretty good shape. We have ongoing erosion issues, and that's an ongoing thing, so we have ongoing maintenance costs. But in terms of our overall costs of managing the facility, right now, we're looking at trespassing and controlling vehicular trespass as one of our biggest potential costs, and that is not addressed in any way in these estimates. And so we still work on that issue because that's an area of community concern, and it's part of managing that property. But it's really not addressed in any way by any of the things that are overseen by Cal Recycle.
Thank you. Well, I was thinking when that was presented to us at last meeting, the idea of blocking access, it occurred to me that hedges are really hard to drive through.
I wish. I really wish. But unfortunately what we found, and we will have a separate item discussing this probably at the next meeting, but unfortunately the people who drive off-road vehicles in that area are motivated enough that they have sawed down several trees in different areas where people have placed fences, and then the trees were the barrier, so if they can saw down a tree, they can saw down a hedge.
I dare them to saw down my hedge.
Oh, well, I appreciate the different views of it.
We will,
Something to consider.
No, I mean,
we can provide your address.
I'll give them my saw, and it still won't do it.
All right. Thank you but I appreciate the input, and we will probably talk about that next meeting.
All right. We don't have anything under our, I'm assuming that there's consensus to submit the letter asking them to reduce our multiplier.
Since it was already submitted, I don't know.
No, it hasn't
No, it
been
has not
submitted.
been submitted yet.
But we do have standing direction to do so, and I'm just reminding you we do this.
It's got a date of March 5th on it.
Oh, that's when I wrote it.
Okay, just check.
Thank you. Like I said, I need
It's all
editing.
good.
It hasn't gone yet.
Absolutely.
It has
But
not
we
gone
could,
yet.
we could change and say, hey, charge us more.
Or we can just change the date.
We might change the date until after March 17th would
Fair
probably
enough.
be a wise decision.
Yes, consensus.
All right.
All right,
Very
I
good.
agree with
Thank you. We don't have anything for collections under the transport station 6.1. We do have the staff report regarding
This
outreach
is
to.
just an update about where we're at with the Northern Transfer Station process. Essentially, one of the things that became really clear as we were talking to the Talo Adine Tribal Council was the importance of considerations of traffic and intersections. And essentially, there are 3 intersections that we're looking at. And in conversations with Tamara Layton of the Local Transportation Commission, she made it clear that some of those research funds don't necessarily have to come from this agency, but they are some of the kinds of things that Caltrans sometimes does, that LTCO sometimes does. And by merely letting LTCO know we would be interested in any help you can give us in those traffic studies, that they can do that. So, but of course that would need support from the city and county representatives that are there, and I'm hoping that to the extent that you all can hold sway on that, that we have your support. But I would like approval to submit this letter requesting that support.
Move to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Any public comment? Seeing none, close public comment. Would you please pull vote?
Chair and score.
Yes.
Commissioner Cowan.
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins.
Yes.
Commissioner Howard.
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. 6.2, discussion and possible action regarding contingency operations during a pandemic, and specifically COVID-19 right now.
Yep. So this was written over a week ago, so things have changed quite a bit. But I also have supplemental information in the agenda packet, the supplemental that I submitted to you all. The good news is that, at least according to the Center for Disease Control, the materials that have been in households where COVID-19 is active do not need special treatment or handling. So that's very good news, because chances are we will be seeing some of that, and we want to make sure that all of our workers are as protected as possible so that we can continue to provide the public services. So that was one of the big questions. The other, but you'll see in this, the series of plans that we have, of course, we could hire more staff, but hiring staff and training staff takes time. And so the plans that are before you in terms of the operational strategies, that's on titled Contingency Operations Plans for the transfer stations during pandemics, is presuming things are moving so quickly that we don't have time to hire staff and backfill. But bottom line is, first we start with precautionary scheduling to try to minimize contact so that we stay as healthy as possible. If a person starts having symptoms, they stay home. That's why Kira's not here right now. We're being particularly cautious right now because we don't have the information about how it's circulating, except that to the extent that it's been tested here, it hasn't been found here. So we're lucky at this point in time. Then next step would be signage at facilities, advising customers how to minimize exposure, like the sign that we posted on the door of meeting day, saying we're staying 6 feet apart. If you're over 65, we recommend that you not go to public events and meetings, and that if there are more than 10 people here, that we recommend that you go home, watch online, interact online. There's the questions about disposal of possibly contaminated materials. I've asked Hambros for a discussion of this, and like I said, both Mr. Schlegel and Mr. Wallen are out, and I have not received anything back, although we've had that conversation. Then we would next go to partial closure of the transfer station. Again, this is not a step we would take lightly, but if it comes to that, that may be where we're at. Because if people are minimizing their exposure, if they're minimizing their time out in the public, then Recology can still collect their trash. You can sign up for trash service. You can start and stop that service. And as this progresses, we may have to revisit different strategies on trying to provide collection services to affected households. But at this point, we don't have additional strategies on that front. Next step would be actually closure or partial closure of the Klamath or Gasky transfer station as outlying sites, because we would start hunkering down and maintaining the operations at the Delaware County transfer station. Worst case would be we maintain operations while staff have symptoms. And again, it's worst case, but this is a central public facility, and there are public health impacts all the way down the line. And so not having any trash service has public health impacts as well. So, and then the last stage was, of course, total closure, and none of us want that or are planning for that or believe that would be an eventuality. But these are the phases of response.
Would it be beneficial to have particle masks worn when our attendants are interacting with the public, or when they're interacting with maybe the garbage in the large building, pushing it around just in case stuff flies up?
The information we have so far is that it's unlikely that the materials at the transfer station can transmit the virus. The virus only lives for several hours on most surfaces, and usually there's been many hours between the time that the materials have been placed from collection to the time that they actually arrive at the transfer station floor. But what you say is potentially protective. What I've heard from CDC is that masks are most effective for people who are already symptomatic. So should any of our staff have any symptoms, I will absolutely try to make sure that they have masks. And that, first of all, that they're not working unless they're the last option that we have. Because I have no intent that our facilities be a source of the virus spreading. So, But you're right. Should it come to the point where our staff have symptoms and we still have to work to stay open, we'll be wearing masks. We already have gloves available. Money is a concern right now because while it's true the virus might not live on surfaces very long, if we have a customer who comes in who has the virus and just hands them a 10, that 10 is active, right? So all of these things are concerns. All of those things.
Right.
Right. And we, those of you who know, a part of how we do our regular customer interaction at the transfer station is we hand them these little cards, right? So, and it gives you a number, and then you come back and you say, I'm number 131, and then we look up your ticket, and that's how we charge people.
Are we going to be sanitizing those between?
We will be taking more steps to sanitize those, but
Okay.
in all honesty, on a daily, we're not going to sanitize them every time between customers at this point in time. It may come to a point where we're doing that, but we would have many fewer customers than we do now in order to have time to be able to do that. But once this starts impacting, we probably will have fewer customers.
It's just a wipe.
We will be taking those steps and considering that. I appreciate. Kathy, you have a thought on this?
One thing is that wipes are hard to come by, so, and they dry out quickly. But what I am strongly recommending the staff in the gate practice is wearing gloves, wiping down everything, the keyboard, and especially the signature pad. When you pay with a credit card, you have to sign on the signature pad. Wipe that down as often as possible. And the biggie is, we don't have a lot, but we do have some hand sanitizer. So when the person first pulls up on the outbound scale, want a shot of hand sanitizer? And most people take you up on that. And so that puts it on their hands before they even touch us. So
I'm going to push back here a little bit. If these cards, and I'm not a regular frequent user, but if these cards are a numbered card that are touching multiple hands from the general public in and out of that booth and back out and back out,
I have a suggestion.
yes.
Would it be possible to pre-print just paper cards with the numbers and hand them out and don't recollect them?
Oh,
Disposable.
I mean, how big are these cards?
Well,
So you put them four
well,
up on a piece
that
of
is
paper?
actually a pretty reasonable suggestion. And
And
while
you
we're
keep
all
your
about
card, we
reuse and
don't want it back.
recycling, we have plenty of one-sided paper that we could use for that
Yes.
purpose.
Right.
So,
I mean, the whole
That's an
idea of this
excellent
back
suggestion.
and forth stuff on a piece of plastic that can
No,
hold
that's-
germs.
and
Thank you.
it's just helpful to have these discussions where everybody's thinking about it, because
Yeah.
these are things that we were not discussing in the office, so thank you.
I was thinking that today as I was dumping trash for my dad today.
Uh-huh.
I was holding that card and I'm like, huh.
Who touched that?
This isn't a very good idea
Well,
right now.
Let me assure you that we will be discussing each of these suggestions, and if we don't, we
I'm
will
gonna
be
push
doing
back
something that
I'm
will
going to push back
dramatic.
again. I don't want you discussing this specific thing. I think that there's probably pretty much clear direction here that those plastic cards need to be put away starting tomorrow, and that disposable numbering needs to be implemented.
Fair enough.
To protect our public and our employees. We're living in a different world right now, and that to me seems like that's
I'll accept that as
a
direction.
little bit of copy paper and some toner is worth
Yeah.
dealing with this right
Okay.
now.
So I have one more question. If it does get as bad as we think it could, people are going to get sick, they're going to all of a sudden not be able to work, and many of your employees live paycheck to paycheck. So what are we going to do to protect them in that sense?
We do have sick time. We do have FMLA. Thankfully, our employees are covered with, Kathy?
Just want to make clear that FMLA does not have anything to do with pay. All it does is hold your job open. So it doesn't have anything to do with taking home pay.
The state and the feds are also expanding on rules with regards to both unemployment and disability. So hopefully that will make it easier if it comes to
Legislation
that.
being considered right now for basically 14 days to be paid by the employer that should go through the House next week.
The other question that I have regarding this is something that you put together that's part of at the very beginning of your recommendation is, are we going to place some kind of time frame on this paid administrative leave for somebody who's asymptomatic? I mean, as it's written right now, we're saying that if somebody is simply, they identify that they have possibly been exposed, we're saying you stay home and we will just keep paying you?
Yeah, and I'm dealing with that right now at
That
our creamery in the Bay Area.
When I discussed this issue with Kathy Hafterson, basically she said that if they're asymptomatic under normal circumstances, if you send somebody home, then you have to pay them, because otherwise they would be working and they would be entitled to those wage hours. So one of the recommendations is that the board authorize me to, if a person I believe has likely been exposed and is not yet symptomatic, that I can send them home on administrative leave and pay them to do that, so that we protect the rest of our staff. Because at this point in time, if I send somebody home, then I'm either depriving them of their job because they don't have any symptoms, or they aren't getting paid. Or I'm forcing them to use their own sick time or vacation time, and that's not okay. So that's something new.
I think that, and I don't miss Mr. Howard, I think I heard what he said. I think that the prudent response is that these asymptomatic people who could have been exposed need to be tested, and if the test is negative, then they need to be back to work, because we're going to need this workforce.
I also have something. At my job, we can call off up to 3 days, I believe, before we need a doctor's note. But is there a system here or policy that dictates when a doctor's note is required for a sick day or not?
Typically, sick days are available for a variety of reasons, and they don't necessarily require a doctor's note.
Okay.
But when a person doesn't have symptoms, then sending them home, there isn't a provision at this point where they get paid.
To send them home and without there being a next strategy to just continue to pay them to stay home,
not gonna happen.
we can't afford to do that. So that there has to be a next step for an asymptomatic person who we are concerned has potentially been exposed. They need to be tested.
And I'm sorry to
Well,
say, there has to be accountability as well.
So first of all, right now, asymptomatic people are not going to be tested. There's not enough tests. It's hard enough to get tested if you do have symptoms.
Right.
But I would say that the logical next steps would be, as in the case with the employee that we thought perhaps was exposed, that test to the person, that was the link in the chain, came back negative. So at that point, the isolation, quarantine, whatever, wasn't necessary anymore. And it was very short-lived. The other would be if that comes back positive or whatnot. I mean, I think currently 2 weeks is the quarantine period.
Right.
That seems like maybe that's the outside number.
That makes sense, too.
Yep.
What do you mean that tests are not available?
There's not enough tests to test everybody. They're not testing everybody.
Well, Korea seems to be testing 20,000 people a day. There will be
find out?
tests available. In Delnart County, there are tests
Well,
available
just
now.
at this moment, hopefully that
And there
will
will
be
be
soon.
tests available.
Sure.
We need to
Right.
have a protocol in place, which we need to take a look at here today, which we're doing. If an employee is suspected and is showing signs, like the previous ones that have gone and contacted Dr. Raywald and have been tested, even though those folks, as he suspected, weren't bilateral respiratory illness, he still tested them anyway. and they've all come back negative.
Are you telling me there's enough tests in this county right now to test everybody who walks through the door who wants a test?
I don't know. I haven't talked to
It's my
emergency
understanding
services.
there isn't, and there's a list or whatever to go through.
Yeah.
And so
Determine.
if the director feels that somebody is that symptomatic to stay
We're
at
not talking
home,
about symptomatic, we're talking about asymptomatic.
why
So
are we
somebody
sending
that doesn't have
asymptomatic?
symptoms.
Why are we talking about
So
asymptomatic?
the
Because-
idea of a person who
Exposed.
believes that they have been exposed but aren't showing symptoms, because that's the biggest threat to this whole spread of this virus is people who have been exposed but aren't sick,
Right.
and yet they
We
have
can't
the
afford to
capacity.
pay for that.
Okay, well,
Not forever. I think that the
And that's why we
the
need to test.
responsible thing is a combination of one of the two things that either what Martha suggested or my question, that is that once a person has been sent home on administrative leave,
Bio wall right there.
one of two things should be happening. Either there should be some protocol for a testing of the person they believe they got it from, because this person obviously is symptomatic, so that we can find, and a negative test would say, then you need to get back to work. Or the possibility, as testing becomes available, for this person who believes they're exposed to be tested. My only point is that we can't just arbitrarily send somebody home because they say, I think I've been exposed, and keep paying them.
For past 2 weeks, right.
and to be honest, the general germination period, the average germination period is between 3 and 4 days. So, well, that's what I've heard.
Right, and this is not something that I intend to,
No,
we don't have the staff to do it, even if
No,
I
know.
somehow wanted
But
to.
and that's my concern is that we don't have, I mean, we have 9 employees as it is.
Right.
So the idea of 3 employees showing up tomorrow and saying, I think I may have been exposed, and you have a responsibility to say, well, then you got to go home. There has to be a step 2. Has the person that you believe has exposed you to the virus, have they been tested?
Yep.
And when that test is available, you need to provide that to us. We will keep you on administrative leave pending the results of that, or your own test. That just seems like a responsible approach, and, you know, there has to be a limit to what we can pay.
Absolutely, and I wouldn't, I'm not
Absolutely right.
asking for carte blanche direction. In fact, I would recommend that to the extent any such action is necessary of giving or putting a person on administrative leave out of precautionary concern, I would want
Oh, I
to
agree
discuss
with that.
with the chair,
Yeah.
is this the right action? Do you have other suggestions? Is this another approach? But it would only be for a few days until we could get a better diagnosis.
Yeah.
And generally, we don't send people who are asymptomatic home out of concern unless there's a real concern. In the case that we had,
There was
there was a real concern in that the person was partnered with a person who was directly exposed to a person who is yet being tested. So if that person tested positive, then that partner was exposed, and we were all exposed, or potentially. So it was a learning situation, but it was also a situation where I recognized that I actually don't currently have the power to do that. I can give administrative leave days as a reward for good performance, but I don't have the wherewithal to give more than 3 administrative leave days, and if it takes more time to get the tests back, then that's not appropriate. And furthermore, when I give the administrative leave days awards based on merit, then it's not appropriate for me to say that administrative leave day I would like you to take at this point in time, because we need you to be safe for everybody else.
Okay.
So that is my suggestion, is that the director be authorized to place employees on paid administrative leave in consult with the chair, and that's the main direction. I appreciate the additional direction to immediately implement disposable numbering.
Okay. Anything else? Huh. Okay. Any public comment? Okay. Seeing none, then we will move forward with that. Do we need to?
I
Do
think
you got
that's.
consensus direction, or council, are you fine with us just providing consensus direction on this, or do you want a specific motion?
I think a motion would be appropriate in this circumstance.
I'd like to hear a motion, because I don't think we're all in agreement right now. So what's the motion?
I'm assuming the motion would be the bullet point or number one under recommendation is that the director have the authority, and he's added with consultation of the chair, to place employees on paid administrative leave who are asymptomatic but are known to have been exposed or likely been in contact with somebody who has COVID-19. I think the follow-up to that, my preference would be that when that happens, there is a follow-up with either the results of the testing of the likely place of exposure or a test for the employee themselves.
So we're just taking action on the one recommendation, is that correct?
I
And
think
nothing
the,
else contained in item
I don't know
6.1?
about all the operation stuff, we haven't really even talked specifically about the suggestions regarding operations other than the card thing. I think that there's more
Because
things
there's
to.
an item 2 in here, so I just wanted to be
Yeah.
clear, and I think council's advice is correct.
Guidance under item 2 in advising that we immediately implement disposable
Who
numbering.
did?
About the disposable numbering, are
Did
there
we
other?
discuss that? Have we discussed this table back here?
No,
No.
I didn't think so.
no.
So we haven't addressed item number 2 yet.
We addressed a piece of item number 2 as it directly relates to the Delaware County Transfer Station. We have not talked about the entire piece. So let's see if we can come to an agreement on number 1, and then I think that number 2 does, it would be good for us to have an extended discussion to make sure that we understand what we're talking about on an operational basis.
So I'd move only on item number 1, unless you want to create the 6.1 as a total package moving forward.
No, I think separating these right now is really important. Number 1 is a very critical personnel decision.
Then at this time, I'd move to authorize the director to place employees on paid administrative leave who are asymptomatic but are not known to have been exposed or likely to have been exposed or in contact with a person exposed to COVID-19 virus or any other disease with pandemic potential. The director will report to the board the number of employees and total hours of such paid administrative leave each month as part of the director's report.
Would
But
you be
adding-
amendable to adding the follow-up of either testing of the supposed exposure or the employee?
Including the testing.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll second that, as long
All
as it's
right.
added.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any public comment? Okay, would you please poll vote?
Commissioner Cowan,
Yes,
Commissioner Tompkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno,
Yes.
Commissioner Inscore.
Yes.
And
Or-
I just received a word from Jay that commercial testing will be available soon
Good.
in Delaware County.
yeah, and I agree with that, but it isn't here now, so you were,
By the time this thing hits.
And I'm going to be honest, if you go to a doctor, or if a person goes to a doctor and says, hey, this is my job, I deal with the public day in, day out, I'm sure that person will have a good rationale for getting tested.
Yeah,
right,
listen, this stuff is, all of these things that we're trying to figure out how to navigate this is changing
Daily.
it was changing every couple of days, and then it was changing daily, and now I'm telling somebody something and my phone dings and I have an email and I have a new update. I mean, I think we have to be somewhat fluid in what we're doing, but we have to do the things that we're talking about now of setting some basic framework that we're going to use until we need to change that. So let's,
I'm sorry, I have another question.
yeah.
Say we have to take these steps to do administrative leave or close the transfer station or whatever. Any costs associated with prevention or whatever, would that be reimbursable, do you think?
It's part of the-
through-
it is part
Through
of
the
the-
emergency declaration?
It is. Part of the emergency funding bill that was approved yesterday includes money to recycling and reuse.
Okay.
for these very things. That's part of the reason why I didn't even think about that till you just asked that right now. It might have been good for us as an agency, just as the city did last night, to declare a state of emergency for recycling and solid waste, because those funds are going to be available. I don't think it's going to matter because the city and the county that makes up this JPA, and those are both
And because the
declarations
state
are gonna
has
be
as
made.
well.
Yeah.
And not just that, if we do take steps to, say, purchase more wipes, more masks, more anything, more cleaning products, could that be part of that as well if
Could be.
for prevention?
Probably
I
should
don't know.
track everything that.
Just track it. Yeah. So, it's just a thought. Not masks.
There is a name.
Can't get them. But I mean, as we do some of these things, I think we're going to
They'll become
discover
more
that
available.
our purchasing, that we will make notations. It's going to be really obvious when all of a sudden we started buying, whereas we bought a package of wipes once a month, and now we went through 4 packages at the pool because people were coming through and saw them and just took the whole package. Because they couldn't get them at Walmart, so they just stole the ones that we put out at, I mean, those are the,
Right, I sent Daphne from the homeless shelter last night to my house to pick up, I had an extra jar of sanitizer.
okay, so with that in mind, let's talk a little
like
bit
there's
about
nothing out there.
the operations thing, and maybe the easiest way, as opposed to looking at it from the narrative standpoint, is to go to the chart, which sort of gives this progressively more restrictive, or what, I don't know what the word we're
So
using.
the disposable numbering suggestion would be going just under normal operations.
Right. That's with no changes, anything. So, looking at the chart then, as far as the steps that become more precautionary in dealing with the public, and that's how this moves down through this chart,
Yep.
where it's more aggressive in restrictions of services, or how we provide those services, all the way down to total closure. So I guess I would be interested from the board in looking at these things of are there things that are part of this plan that you don't like, would like to adjust, or feel that needs to be implemented, and what are the triggers for those implementations?
Personally, I'd be the last person to second guess our director on how that's best to work. So it's up to you guys.
Okay, so are we at normal operations right now, with the exception of the fact that we've given some direction regarding the numbering slips?
That's correct, sir.
So at what point in time, what will,
Well, we've started precautionary scheduling in that, for instance, Kathy is often working the weekends, and then we're having Haley, the other person from the accounting staff, work the other days. So that sort of provides some separation. After this meeting, probably Kira and I will do similar things where we're minimizing overlap. I'm working with Andrew Butcher of Digital Needs Services to enable both Kira and I to work remotely from home. That's less functional for the accounting staff because of the different records that they need to refer to, and the printed tickets, and the cash in the bank, and all of that. And for gate staff, obviously, they're rather associated with the facilities, which aren't going to move. So we can't have gate staff log in from home.
no. Be a challenge. Automated gate camera.
So that's what. So we're essentially in those first 3 things. We'll be looking at the disposal numbering, and we're doing precautionary scheduling. But as far as customers go, normal hours, normal operations. And no additional signage about precautions. Generally, it's a pretty low-risk situation, but we could add signage encouraging people to stay 6 feet apart and letting them know that we do have hand sanitizer available, and we could remind them about. Kathy is hesitant on that last point.
So I guess the reason I wanted, reason I wanted to discuss some of this is we're all in consensus then on when this starts based on item number, I guess, 3, signage at facilities. When do we start curtailing hours and all that?
I think those are the questions that
Only when our staff starts dropping and we don't have the staff available and we don't have the time and capacity to train more staff. This is,
Well, right now the plan says starts when pandemic cases confirmed in Del Norte. It
and
doesn't say something specific to the Solid Waste Management Authority. So I'm just curious on signage at facilities and operating plans with HWSG in the table. And so if a case is confirmed here, all of a sudden we go on to lockdown? I mean,
no,
what's being suggested?
signage at the gate.
I guess the question that I have then is if in fact we have a confirmed case, then we have questions about, we have questions in essence about every interaction in fairly close proximity of people who come through that gate. At what point in time do we begin to implement how we handle those interactions?
Yep.
Because, so is that when does this partial closure kick in? Does it kick in at that point in time? Does it kick in when there's 5 cases?
When the staff shortage becomes severe enough that that's what we have to do.
So,
Because we don't have the additional staff, and like I said, it takes 6 months to train just a gate staff person. So while we may start the hiring process now, that even if we did that tomorrow, that wouldn't necessarily give us one more staff for several months ahead. So right now, our strategies is to cross-train so that there are more staff available to step into different positions should that become necessary. But we only have 9 staff, and so any 2 staff being missing can be potentially devastating to the agency. And so these plans are drawn up accordingly.
so then the approach, what I'm hearing is then so long as we have somebody to man the gate, transfer station stays open.
That's it.
What then is our protocol for manning that gate once there is a confirmed case in our community? Because how you do that right now while there is no confirmed cases, to me, is different than when that time comes, because you have no idea what those interactions have been. I mean, if I read it correctly, a single individual in South Korea is responsible for 80% of those confirmed cases now because of these interactions. It doesn't take long to interact with a lot of people. So I think we need to be talking about, because the likelihood of that happening before this board sits like this again is significant. And you need to have some kind of direction, and there probably needs to be some kind of training going on right now with those people who are in those positions of, these are the things that we are preparing ourselves, that when this happens, we need to be prepared to do that, so that there's not some sense of panic and how are we going to do this. We need to be thinking about these things now, and I don't know exactly what that process should be, protocol should be with that, with interacting with the public at that point in time.
Protecting themselves. Gloves, you're already doing. Sanitizing, you're already doing. Mask, getting a mask.
I'm good with a full spacesuit if you want to go that far.
You can get that white suit, I'm sure we have a few beekeeper suits around the county, but being cautious.
I
What-
just think that you
What
need to,
prevents you from actually getting a suit other than supply and demand right now? If we want to take it to that extreme.
I wouldn't want to implement PPE that wasn't
Masks,
effective.
gloves, sanitation should be implemented right now.
We've got the gloves. We'll do the disposable numbering. The masks aren't available.
Right.
We have the hand sanitizer. And
Sounds like a
we
good plan.
just had a staff meeting last week, and we went over washing and the basic information you're all familiar with now. But that was the first step, and emphasizing again, for those of you who haven't heard, wash your hands at least 20 seconds. Because what you want to do is, to the extent that you touch the virus, you really don't want it in contact with your mucous membranes.
Yep.
So you want to wash your hands before the next time you touch your face. It's the general rule. But we just went over that. So we're all trying to adapt as best we can. But it's all new information, and we haven't planned for pandemics before. So there isn't a model that we're operating off of.
Right.
We also went over staying 6 feet away.
Right.
Even when you're working in the gate, that is possible.
Yeah.
You have to be conscious of it, but it is possible.
Give us one of those grabbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
No, have a grabber. Here you go. We don't want the number
Martha?
back, but here it is.
I do have one comment, just something to think about is, we're not just talking about employee protection, but it's those devices or those things that they're going to be handed between customer to customer to customer to customer that could be carrying, one infected customer gets some bodily fluid on the keypad or whatever, and that's going to get passed on down the line, and that's
So
the
why-
potential
Why wouldn't we
issue that needs to
issue
be.
a glove protocol at that
Yes.
point, like Lori's suggesting, or even a face mask?
Yeah,
But
the
it's
face
not,
mask
it's
is a
not
different
just
thing, but I
the
think-
employee, it's your
The Madison County
customers.
got
The
very
cus-
excited.
you know,
Which, I mean, maybe, they're responsible for their own precautions too, but just something to think
I
about,
don't
if we
think,
protect
and
the
I don't
employee,
know that
there's-
this is, that, I don't know how I feel about a lot of this stuff. But but in essence, if, with the the keypad and so forth, I don't think I would be offended if a gate staff handed me a glove and said, would you put this on before you key it in? Because in essence, what I'm saying is I don't know who touched that thing last.
Then you're
And-
going through,
It is going to have to be 2 gloves because it's not a keypad. You're not putting in a pin, you are signing.
it's a
So you
sign-
have to hold it with
signature.
one hand and sign with the other hand.
Sorry,
One
I-
suggestion that I'll just throw out is
Can't we cover
going
it?
back to hard copies. We print out on the thermal paper, we have to have them sign one that we keep, but that would eliminate the handing the keypad back and forth. But then you've got a pen, possibly a clipboard for them to write on, so I don't know that it would
can we
help.
cover the
Spray the son
keypad?
of a bitch,
Just,
right?
just
We could,
sanitize
but there
it.
again,
Come on.
as soon as one person touches it, unless you're going to change the
bleach.
bag in between each customer.
Yes, no, you're right.
Sanitize it between each customer
Why not?
at that point.
That may be the only practical
Maybe-
method is, but
you go.
it's, so I guess as long as people are listening at home, anticipate slower traffic at the transfer station. Because
Absolutely.
these things
Why
will
not?
increase the amount of time. And so
I could
to
agree
the
to
extent that you can defer your trip to the transfer station, that's probably wise.
As a regular user, I could agree with that. I have no problem.
Yeah,
But everybody's going to be okay taking a little bit longer and being a little bit safer, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
I'm willing
I'm
to
getting
take the heat for
disposable numbering and cleaning the signature pad after every use.
yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Any other questions about this chart and so forth as far as how some of these things and the purpose behind them?
I think, what we're doing right now is assuming that it's here already, and we are going to stay ahead of it if we can.
Right.
That's exactly.
I think that's the way we need to think. That's what we are doing right now, and I think that's the best we can do personally.
and I really appreciate all the suggestions. It's good to have your good minds on this problem.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I have been texting back and forth with our account clerk. The paper numbers go into production right now,
Good.
and so they will be in use first thing in the morning. So
Very
thank you
good.
for that
Thank you.
suggestion.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Very good. Appreciate that. All right.
Thank you, Martha.
Yeah, very good. Appreciate it, Martha. Anything else regarding our operation protocols? Okay, I think you've gotten very
So,
good direction tonight.
just as things update, as we learn more, I may revisit this and put this back on the agenda to just keep you up to date with our strategies.
As I was going to say, as far as the masks, I don't know if you can't get them ordered. I don't know if reaching out to some of the other agencies, maybe the
They
prison,
can't get them either.
or
We've
they
been
don't have
meeting
them
with
either.
Emergency services.
Okay.
I mean, there
was
are
just a thought.
alternatives. One could do a
I don't know.
kerchief
Maybe
or
the
things like
hospital.
that.
I don't know
Just
if they
mostly
have
you're
them.
trying to keep it to yourself.
One of the, what I've read about the mask, for people who are not exposed, who are not already symptomatic, that the biggest thing about the mask, what it does, is that it keeps you from putting your hands to your face.
Right.
And-
I'm touching this desk up here, and my habits of scratching my beard, picking my nose, whatever it is by having that mask, it prevents you from taking it off of one surface and putting it close to your mucous membranes more than it's protecting airborne coming from you or from somebody else. And so, yes, we could all put our bandanas over our faces. In some ways, that would probably protect us. We would look funny, but some of us look funny whether we have it or not.
I know one experience that we had as a result of the smoke from the fires is that when you're in the gate, you're moving pretty quickly most of the time. And it can be hard to breathe. Those things get really warm. So, for what it's worth.
Yeah, it's true.
The final question on this, and we've made all of the personal protective equipment available,
Good.
and we've advised that this is available. We have not yet required employees to do this. So that is the additional question, is if the board feels like this is a requirement on the gloves question, for example, on the mask question, or you're going to leave that to staff's discretion as situations evolve.
I think the mask is a discretion thing. It just feels like the gloves should be a mandatory thing now, that they should have gloves on. That's what it seems like
I
to
agree.
me. We're protecting our employees.
Are they having a problem wearing gloves right now?
I am not sure that they're wearing them all the time. I have advised them that I think it's a really good idea. I've made them available. But the last time I went out, I noticed that the gate operator did not have them on.
And on it,
He didn't have them on today
it's just
when I interacted
uncomfortable to wear rubber gloves for an 8-hour workday, and to do that day after day, week after week. It's not comfortable.
I think the policy should be, if they're dealing with money, if they're dealing with the public, they should have gloves on. When they're not, cool, they can take them off.
Precaution.
It's a precaution.
Stop them from picking their nose.
Okay.
Yeah, it just feels like that's what they should be doing. I mean, workers in lots of industries are expected to have gloves on for extended period of time. I'm assuming we provide regular breaks as an employer. They're welcome to take them off during that period of time. We're not trying to be a hassle. We're trying to protect our employees and the public.
And when they get a lull, take them off.
Sure.
Dry your hands out, I mean, I wear gloves at work all the time. So,
Well, thank you for that experience then. Good.
Okay, so do you
Okay.
feel like you've got some pretty clear directives?
Kathy?
Of what the board's expectations are from an operational standpoint?
Blake,
Do we have consensus on the glove policy? Do we need a motion on that?
I don't think we need a motion. I don't see anybody up here that feels differently. I think there is consensus here that the glove is a necessary precaution at this point in time.
The three necessary things that I've heard from the board, to be really clear, is the disposable numbering,
Yes,
the cleaning of the signature pad after every use,
Yes.
and gloves.
yes.
Correct.
We
Mr.
all
Howard?
agree?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
I just want to be clear on the empowering pieces that the board is authorizing today and what we're authorizing in items 1 through 2 for the director and the administrative assistant. we haven't addressed a full closure, correct? In
And I'm hoping, sincerely, we don't go there, and there would be much communication with the
So-
board before any cutback of
Right,
any
and-
hours.
And that's what I want to make clear, is that anything of that nature needs to come back here in an emergency meeting or otherwise, and we need to make
Okay.
ourselves available by
Yes.
conference call or otherwise to make that decision.
Absolutely.
And
with
the-
the suspension of some of the Brown Act requirements for that, we
Should be
could,
pretty
we
easy.
could teleconference all from our private locations for that emergency item. I think that that's a very good point, that any reduction of services to either our franchise or to our customers needs to have a board action.
Okay. That's workable.
Hours,
So that's including going down in hours, let's say he loses.
Any
employee,
cutback on
loses-
Klamath or Gasky or the Delaware County Transfer Station, because the message to the public is we're open for business.
yes.
We encourage you to stay safe. If you're
Yes.
over 65, you might want to defer your trips, and if you do come, please stay 6 feet away from everybody.
Yes.
There you go.
And if we have to close hours, then the board
We will be
needs to
talking
weigh
about
in.
that before we do it.
Very
Yes,
good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Glad that's
Perfect.
clear.
Okay, 7.1 was about the food rescue, and we have the.
That was an informational item.
The transcript from the thing. I found it very interesting to read the transcript of what they were doing. I was aware of some of it, wasn't aware of all of it, so.
Yeah, sorry for the incomplete sentences and everything, but obviously they're notes but it gives you a feel of the kind of things we're discussing, the kind of good activities the Food Rescue Project is doing, but it is for information only.
The 7.3 was the guiding principles for legislative advocacy. It's the same as we had our last meeting, with the addition of the one principle that Board Member Greenhouse suggested, which is noted in the staff report regarding encouraging the removal of regulations that hamper the development of new technologies to expand recovery of material and energy resources from discards collected in California. That as an additional bullet point to our legislative platform. Everything else is the same unless there are any desired updates or changes.
There was a
correct?
small edit that Commissioner Tompkins pointed out on item number 2, but it's not significant, it's just for clarity. But the significant add was based on Commissioner Greenhouse's comments, and it is the last few sentences. The last 2 sentences, the authority supports the development of pilot programs in and for rural areas to explore and demonstrate approaches to address aspects of resource recovery or solid waste management. The authority also encourages the removal of regulations that hamper the development of new technologies to expand recovery of material and energy resources from discards collected in California.
Very good.
I don't think that goes far enough.
Okay.
Remember, this is a principle. It's not a specific. It's the
I
idea of
understand.
what would fit underneath that category of things.
Well, I wrote up something that I think that might be better,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine.
Advocate for removal of regulations that may hamper the development or implementation of newer existing technologies that increase the efficiency of the breakdown of solid waste, such as closed-loop incineration or trash-to-energy systems.
I guess my only comment back to that, Commissioner Greeno, is that the specifics at the end don't add anything to the statement at the beginning. The statement at the beginning basically says, is if anything comes before us that fits into this category of the idea of removing these restrictions or regulations to be able to do that, then we want to advocate for that.
Okay.
As opposed to advocating for incineration or whatever. If it fits into that category of removing these regulations and restrictions, then what we're saying is that we want to advocate for that. I don't know that it changes anything, but there may be other examples of what you're talking about other than those 2 that would fit underneath that.
I understand.
That would also be things that we would advocate and say, we want that as well. I mean, we would be in support of that as well.
And that was my idea, is those are just a couple of ideas.
I don't think it
There
hurts
may
having
be
those
other
as,
ones.
having those as explanatory examples of what this principle is about, I think is fun.
I don't see it as an issue if you want to put it in parentheses.
So you just add the such as with the-
Such as,
Yeah.
of those things that Mr. Greenow put in there, I think that it gives us some understanding of what this principle is about.
Would give
Yeah.
somebody taking a look at it.
Sure.
And understanding what the commission was
Good
contemplating
with
at the
that?
time.
There's consensus up here that adding that verbiage and that Mr. Greenow brought out tonight as examples of that.
I can write it down for you.
That would be great.
That's, and so we don't need any action for our legislative advocacy. Do we need to, did we vote on it last time?
No, it was deferred.
Oh,
I
I
would-
thought we
I would
voted on it
approve
with the add addition.
Direction to bring it back with
Oh,
that
okay.
addition.
So
That's what I have.
then as it's presented this afternoon with the updated language regarding the principle that was added, so then do I have a motion to
So
approve?
moved.
I have a motion and a second. All right. Any public comment on our legislative advocacy platform? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, and would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Tompkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno,
Yes.
Commissioner Inscore,
Yes.
and Commissioner Cowan.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. It's good input. All right, the last thing that's on our agenda is the Green Ribbon Awards. We have a list of nominees. It looks like a bunch of really good a good list as far as I'm concerned.
But it does beg the question as to how you would like to approach this regular ceremonial item. If we don't want to invite them to the meeting, we want to approve that and then say we'll mail it to you later. Obviously, the big ceremony where we bring everybody together is not what we would advise to do. So, looking for additional direction.
Can we approve them? Can we notify them? And can we do it later in the summer?
All of those things are yes. And you can give us direction to develop these and to invite the folks, but the question is, do we do this at the April meeting? Do you want to do this, just say we're
Why-
doing it later in the year?
Yes.
Right. We will have a ceremony later in the year, but we want to let you know that you are being recognized and we would like to.
Notify the awards.
Right.
Great.
Right, because you
absolutely.
don't want to cut that out unless you want to split it up in threes and bring 3 in one meeting and 3 in the next and.
No.
That's actually an excellent suggestion. It would give a little bit more recognition to each of those individuals.
How many are there? I didn't really.
One,
got
two,
1,
3,
2,
4, 5, 6, 7,
10.
8, 9, 10. We get to do one a month for the next year and just.
No, you can do 3 a month.
Sorry.
You're such a,
Yes, I am. You're absolutely right.
are you supposed to be at this meeting? Aren't you above the age of being out in self-quarantine?
So, yeah, that's great. You get, God bless you. Okay, so I think there is clear consensus to prepare the awards, let people know, and if it appears that bringing them in threes or whatever works out, if
Well-
not, I think that simply saying, letting the people know that we want to recognize them and that we will do it later if that
Later
doesn't
in the
work
summer.
out. Because some may not feel comfortable coming out.
Right.
What I would suggest, if it's okay with the board, is that I work with the chair for each meeting to decide to maybe bring a few on each
Sure.
meeting.
It's fine with me.
See how, like the chair is saying, they may not be comfortable.
Right, and then we can work with
And
case by case.
then we put it in an
Then we do
envelope
it just
and we
like
mail them
just like
next
the
year.
Eileen thing, saying thank you, and we communicate with them following up. Exactly.
An elbow bump. That's correct. Okay.
All right. So, any additional suggestions? Does anybody have any
No, it's a
additional
great
folks?
list.
No.
I-
Okay.
It's a great list as far as I'm concerned.
Good.
Okay, we have reached the end of our agenda. Mr. Ward, anything else that you,
No. Thank you.
did
Good
I miss
meeting.
something?
7.2.
I don't even have a 7.2.
in the packet.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, SB 1383.
Sorry.
That's a big one. Sorry.
Is that on the front page of the agenda?
No, it was in the supplemental, and and I'm sorry about that.
Oh, it's 'cause
This
I'm
was
rolling through
part of the
the-
reason for this being the supplemental item was that we had extensive discussions on this issue with the ESJPA of the rural counties. And bottom line is that there are two pieces of legislation that I think are well suited to addressing what the board would like to do. And so we're looking for support for those pieces of legislation, and specifically that you would authorize the chair to support, to sign letters of support, and that you encourage our elected representatives to co-sponsor two of those bills. And so those bills are, and unfortunately, there you go. So 1191 is the vehicle that the ESJPA is going to be using to try to enact the changes they think are most appropriate to SB 1383. That's not in the bill language currently, but as is often the case, bills change over time. They're introduced one way, then additional language gets added, they go to a different committee, then additional language gets changed. This is part of the legislative process. But the ESJPA staff are confident that those changes are going to fall into this bill. And at that point, it would be very helpful for Senator McGuire to consider co-sponsoring. And so the suggestion from John Kennedy of ESJPA is it would be very helpful not only for us to adopt and approve a letter of support, but to include in that an encouragement to Senator McGuire to consider co-sponsoring the bill.
Is this a timely
Oh,
issue?
yes. Oh, yes. Very. It's happening, and that's part of why you didn't have all of this information in the packet at the time it was published, because I didn't even know the bill numbers. So,
But we talked about this last month.
We did.
The basic framework of
We
what
did.
ESJPA was saying that we're doing. Now we simply have, we have a couple of bills, an Assembly bill and a Senate bill that they're gonna, that can be gutted and repopulated with this information.
1191 is that bill, and AB 2612 is a different bill in that that is essentially a funding mechanism for a lot of these organics processing and recovery facilities, which is critical because at this point, if we're going to be recovering these organic materials, they need to go to facilities that are capable of handling those materials, and those facilities, at least on the North Coast, that don't exist at this time.
I mean, so I guess part of my point is if we were to look up SB 1191, AB 2612, we're not going to see any of this right now. The point is what ESJPA is trying to do is bring in all the language that we've been talking about, that we spent time talking about in our last meeting and then the previous meeting about asking for their advice, is then to get this language dropped into these bills, asking our representatives to support these bills, even co-author these bills, populating with the recommendations so that we have some potential fixes for SB 1383.
That is correct for SB 1191. And AB 2612 is a little bit different than what we've been talking about because AB 2612
Providing
really...
the money.
Exactly, and we hadn't been talking about that.
Yeah.
But it is very complementary and part of the whole picture, so it seemed
Yep.
on topic.
And have you reached out to McGuire or Wood on either of these?
I'm awaiting direction from the board.
Okay. Well, we've been talking about it for a few months. So
Yes, but I didn't have a bill number.
Okay, no, I know, but
Yeah.
when I was chair, we started this conversation months ago. So I was wondering if you have casually had these conversations with them, that it was coming down the pipe.
I'm trying to follow the lead of the ESJPA because they're much more in Sacramento and they're much more savvy about this. So when they say now is the time
Great.
to encourage co-sponsors, that's when I
So you just
come
need a
back to you.
motion?
That's correct.
Or direction?
I would like a motion on items 1, 2, and 3, please. If possible.
It's actually, yeah, Senator Daly it is as of February 20th. Senator Daly is
Yeah.
sponsoring SB 1191.
Right. we're asking for Senator McGuire to
Join in.
on that,
Yeah.
co-sponsor.
He is his benchmate,
Uh-huh.
even though
I
he
know.
doesn't wear deodorant, I'm told.
So I make a motion to, what are you looking for? To reach out to the senators?
No, to draft
or
these
to
2
draft
letters of
these two-
support.
To draft the 2 letters of support on items 1, 2, and 3? Is that good enough?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Have a
Second.
motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any public comment on these letters of advocacy for the continuing to work with, on the planning for 1383? Okay, close public comment, bring it back to the board. Any final words?
The final thing on item 3 was an issue that was brought up by Commissioner Howard, asking about the communities of Oric and other places in Humboldt that seem to be exempt from some of the requirements. And so I dug down a little bit in terms of what those exemptions are and how they play out. And essentially, there's one kind of deferral that's associated with the population density of census tracts. There's another exemption from collection requirements for food waste above 4,500 feet. And so one thing that could be done, just to give us an idea of how big of an issue we're challenged with, is to map those sections of exclusion so that we identify where we would have to be doing food waste collection, should all of these requirements end up falling on us.
Okay.
I think that touches on the issue that Mr. Howard brought up.
There were exemptions in place, and as council provided during the meeting, at post-meeting that both you and I reviewed, there were communities of Garberville, Ferndale, Oric, and others that fell into the exemption where they would not be complying, correct, with this legislation.
That's right, and it's based on the population density in those census tracts. So once the population density rises above that level, then all those requirements immediately come into effect. But to the extent that rural community stays at that rural low density, then
So the part of the discussion that we
Why
did
would
have
the
by
city
email,
be
does the city
knocked
then
out?
qualify?
Yeah.
Yeah, the cities, yeah, Smith River, or just the city would be though, because, yeah, so they would qualify.
well,
I think the city's population was, the population density was too high
that's right.
for the city, for the incorporated city limits.
But anyway, it'd be prudent to do that mapping, so it'd be one more piece of
Well,
information.
that's the working together to find this out, because if there's a way to do this, then we want to do it.
Correct.
Yeah, in the legislation, the rural capital set
That's the population for the city cap, anyway, lots of details.
Get
but
rid of the
it's-
prison.
Away from there. The prison isn't the city's.
I know,
current cap.
so,
Even with that, we don't reach that number, do we?
Not right now.
No.
It also
anymore.
has to do with how many
What do you
people
ask?
per square mile, and it required a very
plus the prison drop
small
down,
number per
which
square
pushes
mile.
you down. Yeah, easily.
I'd have to look it up.
You're probably under six.
I don't,
Well, again, the point of 3 is that we want our director to continue to work with the city and the county and explore all of these things, because we don't want to be, if there's ways to avoid some of these specific regulations, then we want to take advantage of that. All right, I don't think, let's pull the vote on the advocacy letters to our representatives.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Chair Inscore?
Yes.
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for catching that. I was rolling through here and
We
sitting
thought it
right.
was an age thing for some reason.
I'm sure, okay, with that in mind, we will be adjourned until our next regular scheduled meeting, which at this point in time is April 14th, 2020. Stay tuned with that. Be sure that you are checking with regular things with our website to see any changes to any of our meeting schedules or other notifications regarding our facilities. Thank you.